Lonerbox here. You know, that guy from youtube.gov/we are the colony of octopod computer chips that live in the walls of your skull, Lamal. The US election is over, I think. The hysteria around voter fraud seems to be dying down. In the face of the Supreme Court and potentially a lot of people perjuring themselves, their bold claims have evaporated like the last drops of sludge in Rudy Giuliani's brain. Sources in the White House report that Trump is looking increasingly listless and deflated, like he already has one foot in the dustbin of history. But his presidency has been one of those things that pretentious soy brains like myself will probably be trying to explain for decades. In the meantime, here's one video. Part 1. Johnny Rotten. So there's this line I keep on hearing from Trump supporters towards Democrats, which more or less goes, "You've brought back the establishment." And the more I hear this line, I'm reminded of an old tweet from Paul Joseph Watson. A man so insecure he's been tilting his head back for the best part of 10 years because he thinks it'll make him look more masculine. And in his tweet, he simply says, "Conservatism is the new punk rock." Now, at first, this just sounds like the words of someone with no self-awareness and a very apparent humiliation fetish. But watching Trump's defeat, it got me thinking, in a way, I kind of agree with it. What? Okay, so what is punk rock? Safety pins, mohawks, leather jackets, bass players who couldn't play the bass, and the big thing was being anti-establishment. There's a bit of contention about where it came from. It's most likely that the first punk rock scene came from New York in the mid-70s, and then arrived in West London shortly after. There is an interesting theory that the punk sound was pioneered by a black three-piece from Detroit called Death, although I should stress that this is just a theory because I wouldn't want to upset anyone. But one thing we do know is that almost from the very beginning, punk rock was corporate manufactured. Though the movement did bring a wave of DIY bands and independent labels, punk rock was also backed by multinational labels. It was intertwined with the fashion industry, and it was broadcast on TV and radio stations around the world. Sure, you could argue that it worked as a kind of foot in the door for ideas like socialism and anarchism, and a lot of bands like The Clash in particular did quite well at that. There was also the radical feminist wing of punk rock, which was pioneered by Bikini Kill. Their singer Kathleen Hanna had a reputation for going into the crowd to personally remove male hecklers, which is based, but that wasn't until the 90s. But what exactly was punk itself saying? Who was the establishment? How do we get rid of them? What do we do when they're gone? The thing is, and a lot of fans will tell you this, punk was never about offering answers. It was an aesthetic. Bands would write songs about getting blackout drunk on the weekend just so they could show up at work hungover on a Monday morning. It was a way of claiming victory and conceding defeat at the same time. If you listen to folk protest songs, the words are almost instructional. They point to very clear acts like unionizing, demonstrating, and occasionally even voting. Commercial punk, on the other hand, seems both confusing and confused. For the purpose of this video, I want to zoom in on one of the big poster boys of punk, the Sex Pistols. Anthems like Anarchy in the UK, where the words are literally, "I'm an anarchist, don't know what I want," or "Anarchy for the UK, it's coming sometime and maybe, I give a wrong time, stop a traffic line," and it's just like, okay, giving the wrong time or stopping a traffic line, yeah, I'm sure the establishment are really quaking about that. F***ing Sex Pistols. Like, what exactly was that band about? I know they were known for controversial interviews, so let's have a look at one of those.
Good Lord. Now, I want to know one thing. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach and Brahms have all died.
Ours, aren't they?
Really?
Oh,
What are we saying, sir?
Wonderful people.
Are they?
Oh yes, they really turn us on.
What do they do?
Well, suppose they turn other people on.
That's just their subject.
It's what?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
Was it really? Good heavens, you frightened me to death.
Oh, all right.
And then every f***ing one knew what punk was about. Yeah, wearing a swastika on TV and saying fuck to a creepy interviewer a couple of times. Really bucking the system there. What is Johnny Rotten doing these days? Oh, look, he's standing Trump because he apparently speaks to the working class in him. This might be a good point to mention. The median household income of Trump voters in 2016 was $72,000. That's higher than Bernie and Clinton, so it's good to know that most working class people are still less full of shit than Johnny Rotten is. I fucking hate the Sex Pistols. Where were we? Right, okay. The Establishment. Part 2. Hostile Brothers. So, based on what I've heard from left and right-wing voices, the establishment roughly includes the fossil fuel industry, Wall Street, the education system, the IMF, corporations, war hawks, HR departments, mainstream media, woke cinema, and corporate lobbied politicians. And with this, the idea that Trump is somehow outside of the establishment is kind of defensible. Trump's business is in things like real estate, casinos, hotels, the occasional media appearance. But lucrative as these things can be, they pale in comparison to something like finance. And it's easy to see why someone as pathologically narcissistic as Trump would stand himself up against the immense wealth of people on Wall Street, and even with his fortune, feel small by comparison. The establishment isn't a monolith. As Marx would have put it, they're more like a band of hostile brothers. And when Trump sees himself as an outsider, he means it. But as for his efforts as an anti-establishment leader, well, he came out of the Paris Climate Agreement, he held the support of top investors until just before the election, he used an executive order to try and promote patriotic education across the country, he imposed sanctions against Venezuela and tried to install a leader that no one voted for, he gave out massive tax breaks to the highest earners, he intensified drone strikes, and increased the presence of private mercenaries in the Middle East. So if the establishment to you is just, minority representation and people facing consequences for shitty behavior, then I guess Trump's your guy? Has he made it harder for corporations to fire people? Is popular culture less woke than it was in 2016? Well, no. Because Trump doesn't care if you get banned from Twitter, or if you get fired for maybe being racist. It's almost as if he's never been fussed about people getting fired for arbitrary reasons.
You're fired.
But okay, the problem is, all I've done so far is call out a few anti-establishment types as hypocrites, which isn't enough. Being a hypocrite doesn't make you wrong. And as a leftist, I'm not going to take the position of pro-establishment. The question I want to ask is, how did the idea of being anti-establishment become so weak that this crooked billionaire could pass himself off as its champion? Well, part 3, what is? You see, there's this thing called Marxism, and a few decades ago, it was a really big deal. And I don't mean in the sense of paranoid conservatives complaining about it all the time. I mean, throughout the 20th century, socialist and communist parties were prevalent over all of Western Europe. Their influence culminated in strikes and riots across the continent, and peaked in 1968 when a coalition of students and workers in France nearly spurred a full-scale revolution. When they were defeated, public interest in Marxism and communism started to decline, and the idea of revolution in the West faded into a pipe dream. This paved the way for the postmodernists, a group of poncy French intellectuals who wrote some really vague, long-winded shit about how we've all become consumers, identifying more with our favorite purchases, celebrities, and YouTube channels than with our material conditions as workers. With people becoming more and more entranced by this landfill of symbols and identities, postmodernists believed the idea of people organizing along the lines of something like class was impossible. Social movements that were once famous for challenging the world started to turn their attention inwards towards the individual. The hippies of the anti-war movement would later become the hippies of New Age and self-discovery bullshit. As the philosopher Jean-François Lyotard put it, the social foundation of the principle of division, or class struggle, was blurred to the point of losing all of its radicality. We cannot conceal the fact that the critical model, in the end, lost its theoretical standing and was reduced to the status of a utopia or up, a token protest in the name of man or reason or creativity. It's a mystery why postmodernists and Marxists don't get along, eh? But whatever you think of postmodernism, it's difficult to ignore the observation. We live in the age of the individual, you know. Don't call yourself a socialist or working class, just be yourself. like everyone else is doing. One of the other central characteristics of postmodernism is a skepticism of social progress, which is probably why all these people who come waltzing in with their fully costed policies aimed at making the world a better place are always instinctively met with suspicion. For postmodernists, the only victories that can be won are symbolic, not material. So it was with punk rock, and so it is with Trump. And in a world where the people of the biggest economy on earth can't even dream about everyone having their healthcare covered, the bar for political expectation is set very low. And for the legions of people who lose their shit every time someone suggests that they might possibly maybe in some way hold some kind of bias or privilege, or for the shotgun dads who were fed up of having to contain their vulgarities at the dinner table, the act of voting in someone who finally presented themselves as one of their own was as good as politics could get. After Obama's failure to live up to voter expectations, and with Bernie Sanders out of the way, the idea of any meaningful political change happening in America was laughable. The only anti-establishment move left was to do something that would slightly irritate the incumbents. Once again, claiming victory and conceding defeat at the same time. Which is kind of sad, really. And this brand of postmodern politics isn't just confined to the United States. During the Brexit referendum, it was thanks to that same use of aesthetics and symbolism that a bunch of spoiled rotten city traders and daddy's little patriotic pony fuckers succeeded in passing themselves off as an insurgency. Conservatism is the new punk rock. It's a corporate-sponsored rebellion laced with false promises and empty slogans. The phrase "Make America Great Again" was never a message of hope. It was nostalgia for a time that never existed. The wall is a glorified fence at best, and the swamp is now a mountain of black sludge. But with Trump gone, it's only a matter of time before the copium runs out and his followers realize that he is in no way exceptional. And as long as the same resentment and hopelessness that produced his presidency remains, it's only a matter of time before someone just as bad, if not worse, comes in to take his place. Because Trump's contradictory image as an anti-establishment figurehead embedded within the system is nothing new. The Sex Pistols may have been the poster boys for punk rock and anti-establishment politics, but the fact that they were part of a marketing scheme from day one is well documented. They were brought together by their manager Malcolm McLaren, who always saw them as a vehicle to promote his clothes shop, which had connections to Vivienne Westwood. After 2 years and only one album, the band collapsed. At their last gig in San Francisco, Johnny Rotten famously asked the crowd, "Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?" His deflated tone made it sound as if the question was as much for himself as it was for the audience. And when I look at the state of Trump supporters online right now, I just wonder if the same thing applies to them. Maybe the voter fraud thing was a kind of projection? Let's talk about Freud. No, I'm joking. Merry Christmas. Fuck off. Lacrimosa disilla quan risurget ex favela iudicandos homo reus lacrimosa osa disilla quare surget ex favela iudicandos homo reus iuicergo pace Deus pie su Jesudo